And just so happy to be here, starting off the second half of day 2, which means we're just now getting to over the halfway point in this spring spirit drive. I'm Deacon Jeff Compton, along with my co-host Kim Schrader. I want to thank you for joining us, whether or not you're listening to us on the radio, if you're listening us to via stream, if you're watching us via live stream, however it is that you're joining us, we thank you for that. So I want to let you know the number to call if you want to pledge your support for this ministry to keep Catholic radio going and growing here at Holy Family Radio. The number is 888-287-0655. That's 888-287-0655. If you prefer, you can also text the word give to 419-969-3255. That's 419-969-3255. When you do that, it'll respond back with a text that gives you a link to take you to our secure online donation page, and you can make your donation right there. Easy peasy, any way you want. One-time, recurring donation, credit card, bank draft, however you feel most comfortable doing that. We are more than happy to receive it. Right now, we are, like I say, halfway through. Our totals are about halfway to where we want to be at this point, and maybe a little bit less than where we want to be if we want to reach our goal and exceed our best drive, which was 2021, I think, was our best year ever. 2020 kind of, fumbled things up for us just a little bit, and we're kind of trying to claw our way back a little bit. So we're encouraged. We've got new donors from various locations, Lima and Delphus and other places that we're so happy that we are reaching our listeners in a lot of areas that we haven't had donations before. It means we're picking up new listeners. And so we're so happy to be able to share the good news with them here at Holy Family Radio. So Kim, how are you doing? Are you ready to go to start off the second half?
I'm pumped for the second half of the Spirit Drive, second half of today. Ready to go. I'm excited about our guest and to hear their story. I just want to remind listeners that we have some matching funds on the table.
Yes, that's right. We haven't announced that. You want to announce that?
Yeah, we have some very good matching funds on the table. So there's plenty of room for you to call right now, 888-287-0655. Plenty of room for you to call in your donation and essentially have it doubled by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So this donor is willing to double your donation and up to a fairly sizable amount. And
it's a record for us.
It's a
record for us. Go ahead and give it that number.
Up to $5,000.
$5,000, folks.
Yes.
Very, very generous.
Very generous.
And so we're hoping that you take advantage of those right now. That's only for the next couple of hours. So
make that call right now and see that your donation dollars are doubled. 888-287-0655. Of course, you can always donate online at holyfamilyradio.fm, as well as on the Holy Family Radio app, which is available for both Android users as well as Apple users. And if you want to receive a text to take you directly to the online pledging format, just send the word GIVE to 419-969-3255. If you're watching online, you can see Deacon Jeff is, were you showing the app there or the webpage?
Showing the app and then the donate button right there.
Perfect. So hopefully if you're watching, you saw that. If not, just go into the app. You'll be able to find it, just navigating around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not too difficult. We try to make it easy. We're going to have Venmo next year. We don't have it yet, but we'll have that lined up for you next year. Any way you're able to donate and pledge, we really, really appreciate it. So give us that call at 888-287-0655. We're excited to have in studio here with us Bart and Mindy Recker. They're parishioners at St. John the Baptist, Glandorf, and they have come in today to tell us about their harrowing COVID experience. Is that a fair faith journey through that?
It did feel harrowing at times as well, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just kind of toss it right to both of you. How did things get started? How did this journey begin?
So right around September, it was September 17th in the evening. It was 2021. It was a Friday night. Everything seems to happen on a weekend. I came down with a fever. It was a low-grade fever. It was under 100 degrees. And a small cough, a little cough. And I actually thought I was coming up with bronchitis. It wasn't bad. Didn't feel like the symptoms of COVID. So I went the weekend with that. It never broke. The fever never broke. And then on Monday morning, first thing, I went to the doctor to get tested. And I went back again on Tuesday for more testing. And by Tuesday evening, it was Wednesday morning at 2 a.m., I woke up with a oxygen level of 68. And a normal level is at 90 for a normal person.
Mm-hmm. If not higher.
Right.
Yeah.
Not
if
higher,
it's
yeah.
not
For
95, 96.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when I went to the doctor on Monday and Tuesday, they said to monitor my oxygen levels. I had a pulse ox that I purchased online. So I was monitoring it, and when I woke up at 68, I was gasping for air. And quickly, I ran to the ambulatory care center in Glandorf, and they put me on oxygen, and they started calling around to see that they tested me again, and they said it was COVID. And they had a rapid test, and then they started calling around the hospitals because at that time, 2021, the hospitals were pretty full. It was COVID Delta going around. It was the more deadly one, and most of the hospitals were full. They didn't have any rooms left, but St. Rita's had one room left for me. So they gave me an ambulance ride to St. Rita's, where they started treatment right away, trying to get me to improve, get my temperature to break. So I was on all kinds of medications for that week. I was on oxygen, on nose cannula, and I was just getting worse and worse as I was there. And they switched me from nose cannula to a high flow oxygen mask, and then a BiPAP. So I went through the stages of getting as much oxygen as I could to try and get me to recover, but I just kept getting worse. My lungs kept getting weaker, and by that Tuesday the following week, I had to be sedated. I couldn't breathe. They had to sedate me, and so I was out for the next 3 months. And so Mindy can share a little bit about that. So didn't know what was going on.
So just before you start that, Mindy, I just wanted to ask, were you already intubated and on a respirator at this point? Or did that come later?
Tuesday is when they intubated me.
Okay.
Because I couldn't breathe anymore. They had to get me on a intubation machine and a ventilator.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right.
But that Sunday, right before you were intubated, I think you had said that you had requested.
Yeah, I was. I wanted to receive communion on that weekend, and it was late Sunday, and they hadn't been able to get to me yet. By the evening of Sunday, I had a person come give me communion. I wanted to receive God to help me get better. So that was one of the last things I remember before losing my mind. So.
Being intubated.
Right. And going unconscious.
Yeah. So he was brought to St. Rita's, and it ended up being a blessing because we did not realize, but St. Rita's had the only bed available, and they also had the only technology available in the area that Bart would later on need, which was the ECMO unit, which we'll talk about that later. But Bart went into the hospital September 22nd, and on September 23rd, it was his birthday. Now, that was important and significant to me. In fact, this is for me, it's a huge part of the whole story because Bart went in September that year. But prior to that, in July, I was in prayer. And all of a sudden, the number 47 just came in my brain, for no apparent reason. But when it did, I just felt this overall sense of dread, and it felt like death. I never thought about it being a quantity of anything other than age. And right away, I was so overcome with this thought that I was going to die when I was 47, that God was telling me, you're going to die when I really thought that. I called my friend and I was crying, and she said, there's no way God could why would he ever tell you that, But that whole summer, I was telling my family, I would tell my kids, you guys better be nice because I only have a few more years. I'm going to die when I'm 47. And, they would say, there's no way. And I had told my mom, my sisters, everything. So when Bart was admitted into the hospital, he was 46, and the next day was his birthday. And so I called my mom and, told her he was in the hospital, and she already knew about the number 47. And of course, we didn't know anybody didn't know what that meant, but she said, I said, Mom, today's his birthday, and how old do you think he is today? And she didn't have to answer. She just said, don't think like that. You don't know any, maybe God's is just telling you it could lead to that or feel like that, but that doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. So I had to tuck that in the back of my mind. But to me, I just thought, no, I knew he gave me a message back in July, and here we are, Bart being 47. But later on, God actually kind of comes back to this story. So I just tucked that away in my mind and just tried to, continue on and hope that Bart was going to get better. He's at the hospital and he was intubated, so they're going to give him the treatment that he needs to get better. So we just kind of went each day. I would go every day that I could, and each day that I was there, I'd pray the rosary with him, and I was trying to take care of his soul, knowing that the doctors there were doing everything they could to take care of his body. But God really blessed us this entire time, really over and over and over he did. Even though it was so very difficult and hard, he showed himself to me quite often. So October 1st, I had gotten a message from the hospital that Bart's chest x-ray had worsened, which to me didn't make sense, not being in the medical field. I thought, well, he's on the ventilator. He should be getting better instead of worse. And I really thought he was going to get better. So when he started getting worse, I started really getting scared. That morning at our CCD program, they were doing Eucharistic adoration and benediction, and we have the Glandorf television, so I was able to turn on TV and see Jesus in the monstrance, and I just thought, I need Jesus right now. He's getting worse. I'm scared. I just need to be comforted by Jesus. So I just sat in front of my TV just praying, please, Lord, heal Bart. And because it's live TV, I saw that they had finished 10 minutes earlier than they should have. We can't get the kids back to Glandorf Elementary until it's time to get back. And so I called a friend and I said, can you please go talk to Deacon Don and ask him to pray the rosary because Bart is getting worse. So he came out of the sacristy and he said, we're going to pray a decade of the rosary right now for Bart Recker. He's taking a turn for the worse. And I just fell to the floor just crying in sheer love of, knowing too that God is with us right then and there. And there was about 250 kids sitting there all praying the rosary. And, Jesus tells us in scripture, the innocence of the children. And I just kept thinking he has to be hearing these kids praying this rosary for Bart's healing, all these prayers going up for him. He has to be hearing this. So that day I went to the hospital, and I hadn't met his doctor in person yet, but I saw him coming out of his hospital room and stopped him, and I asked him what's going on with his chest x-ray. So he graciously showed me, he was drawing all these diagrams on, blood flows and capillaries and all these things. And in my mind, I'm just thinking, I think I'm going to have him transferred because he's not getting any better. He's just getting worse. We want to go somewhere bigger like the Cleveland Clinic. And so he's going through all this. And then he looked at me and he looked me right in the eye and he said, I know God has called me to do this. And as soon as he said that to me, I had this sense of this doctor was ordained by God. God has chosen this doctor to be Bart's doctor, and we're not leaving this, and I never once again thought we need to leave or we're going to be transferred. And I mean, Bart would go through a whole lot of bad stuff. This was just the tip of the iceberg. This was just starting. And I thought, no, I know God wants him here, and I don't know why. He did share with me that, if he happened to get worse, they do have ECMO. And that stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and it acts as a blood transfusion. He said, we do have this here. We could use it. It would be a last-ditch effort. We don't want to get to that point, but we could if we needed it. So I had a lot of peace about the fact that, okay, he was here. This is the only hospital that had a bed left. God saved that bed for Bart. And you said after you were in the room, the hospital.
The hallways were lined with people looking for a room on gurneys and on beds, and so in the hallway. So there's just a lot of people looking for a room.
Wow. That you said that very same day that you got there, or the next day?
September 17th, or the 22nd that I went in. Mm-hmm. I was looking at the people, and there was people in the hallways looking for a room.
So if you'd gone in a day later, a few days later, you might not have gotten that bed.
Might not have gotten a room.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, would you describe the state that Bart, either yourself or Mindy, that you were in as a coma, or as how can you describe that to laymen?
I had several sedations, IVs. So I was out, and there were some points where I was even paralyzed. Mindy was telling me. because they did not want me to move. They did not want me to cough like I just coughed. They didn't want me to do anything because it could cause blood clots or cause issues.
And he was breathing too fast. He was very anxious. The doctor had explained that COVID can attack any organ of your brain, and it often attacks what's called the pons, which is your regulatory system in your brain. So the things like breathing. And so people with COVID, sometimes their brain thinks that they do not have enough oxygen. So what they do then is they breathe really fast. So a normal normal respiratory rate is in the teens. Bart sometimes would breathe as fast as 40 or 50 breaths per minute.
Wow.
And they couldn't have that because you cannot get good oxygen exchange. So then they would have to put him under sedation. And if the sedation wasn't working and he was still breathing that fast, they would paralyze him. And so yes, he was in a coma for 3 months.
For 3 months.
3 months.
And so the follow-up question to that is, I've heard of cases where people have been aware of things going on around them in, either could hear sounds, could see lights, maybe couldn't put it all together, obviously, under certainly down consciousness levels. But did you experience anything like that? Were you able to share later with Mindy? Oh yeah, I kind of was aware of that.
I had some strange dreams, but I don't recall anything. I know Mindy was there at the hospital. She was reading the Bible to me, and that's what she told me. But I don't recall any of that. And but I had some strange dreams. I remember it was just like, this doesn't make any sense. But that was this dream. But I didn't have any. I didn't see God or Jesus or anything like that. I don't recall that. So I didn't have anything like that, I don't think. But
yeah, at least that you remember, right?
I remember, I don't recall.
He wishes he did, but
I wish I did. That'd been something. But
yeah, that's for sure.
yeah.
So go on. What happened next?
So now the very next day, October 2nd, I was just falling apart still, just so very scared. And I woke up at 6:30 that morning, and I was just crying, just hysterically crying. Nothing could calm me down. And I thought the only thing that can calm me down ever is Jesus. So I grabbed my Bible, and I randomly opened and I pointed, which I do quite often. He speaks to me in that way. I opened and I pointed to John 20:25. And that's where Jesus has just resurrected, but Thomas was doubting. We just had this scripture passage this past Sunday.
We did.
Thomas is doubting that Jesus resurrected. He appears, he says, touch here and here. But then he said, and this is what got me, he said, do not be unbelieving, but believe. Now, as soon as I read those words, it was like something, it hit me, right? My heart stopped. I just knew God was telling me, Mindy, you need to believe. You need to believe. Have faith. I can do this. And as soon as I read that, I just got so excited and happy that God was going to do something here. And so I think you should always share what God does. He works in the world. Sometimes we don't always have our eyes open to see. So if you get something where he does show you, we should share that with others to help others see he's working in our lives. So I thought I'm going to get on Facebook, which is my platform to share Christ. And I'm typing all this up, what he just told me. And then I decided I wanted to go back to the Psalms and just praise him because I was just so happy that he just told me to believe, and that he revealed himself that he was there with me. And so I opened up randomly to Psalm 77. And in Psalm 77, he's talking about that he will show his mighty deeds, that he shows his mighty deeds to the people. And of course, I got really excited about that, because he just told me to believe, and now he's going to show his mighty deeds. Well, during that time, I felt he was calling me outside to go watch the sunrise, which our backyard has a lot of trees, and that it would be hard to actually see the sunrise. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. It's 6:30. I'm in my pajamas. I don't want to get on outside right now. But I really felt strongly I needed to go watch the sunrise. And I felt this had to have been God calling me because I don't normally have that inclination to go watch the sunrise. So I went to my backyard, and I expected to see something beautiful since he called me out there, but I did not. All I saw was these puffs of clouds just all across the horizon. And I just said, Lord, that's exactly how I feel. I just feel so weighed down by this. It's so heavy and it's so hard and scary. But then as I really looked at where the sun was, I could see that there was a lighter layer of clouds above those darker layer of clouds. And he spoke to me saying, Mindy, I am always there. I'm there whether it's dark, heavy times and sorrow and, difficulties, but I'm there also in the joyful times. I've never left you. I'm always there. And I thought, well, maybe this is what he's trying to tell me. And I can go in, but for some reason I did not feel that. And so I waited to see what it could possibly be that he was trying to tell me. So in my waiting, it seemed to take a while, especially standing in my pajamas. And so I decided just to keep listening to him and see what it was he was trying to tell me. And eventually over time, I saw the clouds were dissipating and the sun was coming through. and the word patience came to me. And I realized he was telling me that I needed to have patience with this. I need to believe in what he could do, that he can show his mighty deeds to the people, but I would have to have patience. And I did have to have patience because Bart was in the hospital for 174 days. Yes.
Yeah. That in you know, we're on the Holy Family Radio Spring Spirit Drive here. Stay tuned, and we need you to give us a call at 888-287-0655. We're listening to the faith journey that Bart and Mindy Recker went through as they experienced the worst that COVID has to offer, or right up to the threshold of the very, very worst. So at this point, you're still in early October?
Still early October, yes.
And and Bart's been in the hospital at this point about a week to 10 days.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And so, you know, when God gives me messages, I always try to find confirmations because sometimes I question, was that just myself that was thinking that? Or, you know, so I ask him, Lord, give me confirmation. I actually didn't ask him that day because I was very confident that he was speaking to me. But he did give me confirmations that same day when he told me to believe and to be patient. I had gone to the store of my mom, and the very first thing when I walked in on the top shelf was the word believe. Like, it was just repeated over and over and over. And I knew, you know, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe God ordains things, and it's his providential hand that's in things. And so I showed my mom, I said, look, there's the word believe, you know, he just told me that this morning. And then we left the parking lot, and there was a car with a lot of bumper stickers. I happened to just see what they said. And the very first one I read said, I believe. And I thought, okay, Lord, I'm hearing you loud and clear. I will believe this is what you are telling me. So that was really great. And he was getting, you know, this whole time he would show me that he was going to build an army of prayer warriors for Bart too. I wouldn't have to be doing all of this alone, which was really great. So some friends had organized to have high school youth come to our house and have a prayer-a-thon one of these early days here. And that, for what I do with trying to teach youth about God, that really made my heart sing a lot to see them doing all that too. But
Mindy, can I interrupt
Yeah.
and ask you, because I think a lot of people are curious about how you, it strikes me that you're very attuned to hearing God's voice. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And, you know, I don't feel like God talks to me, or if you say that sort of thing, God told me this, God told me that, a person might say, well, how do you get attuned to that? How do you learn how to listen to that? Can you give us just the briefest glimpse of how you're able to do that so well?
yeah, that's a really tricky question because I really don't know. I mean, I try to pray, you know, I love to go to adoration, and that's where I hear him actually speak a lot to me because he speaks to us in the silence. And I think often our world is so busy and crazy. We have so much noise going on around us. It's very hard to hear him speaking if you're constantly busy. And I think that's the work of the devil. He tries to keep us busy so that we can't hear him. So I would say that reading scripture, you know, he talks to me in there. But he's always around, and he's always giving these inspirations. And, you know, just realizing, again, a lot of people notice coincidences, right? But again, I don't believe those are coincidences. I believe that is God working and trying to show you, look at, I'm here, I'm doing this. And so maybe people can kind of, you know, start, maybe when they recognize a coincidence, start thinking, how could this be God? How could something, you know, so easily happen at the same time? Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that somebody's told me about you is that you're a seeker. Most people are believers in God, but they saw that you were a seeker in God. You seek to find God. So it's
That's well put. Mm-hmm. That's very well put. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the most important thing in my entire life. I mean, I truly believe that my whole life is to serve him. I really do. Like, I think I could go and, you know, write books, which I don't know if anybody would read, but I could go do something like that, or, you know, but all of those those would fade away. But the work that we do for him, whatever he calls us to do. And so I try to pray and just ask him. And I'm pretty blunt when I talk to God. I tell him to be honest and be obvious with me. Like, you know, if I'm asking for confirmation, I'll say, just be obvious, Lord, because you know I need it. And he knows us. He created us. And so I guess that might be a good way to say it. I mean, that's what I want to live my life for is for him.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I know I detoured you a little bit from the story
okay.
there, but I hear people ask that sort of question, a fair amount, and I thought perhaps our listeners could benefit from that. Listeners, give us a call at 888-287-0655. That's 888-287-0655. This is the Holy Family Radio Spring Spirit Drive. It's the one time per year, only one time a year, we interrupt your regular programming to ask you to partner with us, to pledge your support to keeping Catholic radio on the airwaves here in the 13-county listening area that we have throughout Northwest Ohio. But we can't do it without you. This station is 100% listener supported. So please give us a call at 888-287-0655. We've got in studio here Bart and Mindy Recker, who are sharing with us their faith journey through Bart's near fatal experience with COVID, which began in the fall of 2021. So, Mindy, you were just referencing that you were in about early October at this point. So he's 10 days or so in the hospital, and you felt God was telling you to go look at that sunrise outside, and you received some consolation and peace and awareness that God was going to help you through this.
Yes, which I would need, because just 2 days later, October 4th, the doctor would call me and tell me that Bart was in acute respiratory distress syndrome, meaning that his organs weren't getting oxygen, and if they didn't get oxygen to them soon, he would die. And so he now brought back the word ECMO again, and he was asking for permission to put him on ECMO. And even though God gave me those messages, I mean, I still human, I still fall apart, I was still scared as could be, and did not know what this would mean. In fact, I was trying really hard to trust God. And I worked at it every day to trust that what he was telling me would come to fruition. But it would take me quite some time to actually learn what trust really meant. Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, he went through so many trials, ups and downs. I mean, every day one day he would have a success, and then the next day he would have a complication. And so luckily, like I said, God had surrounded me with so many wonderful people who wanted to pray. Part of that started on October 4th when he was put on ECMO. Father Tony had come to the hospital. And first he had given Bart an apostolic blessing, which that brought me a lot of peace, knowing that if he were to pass away, he would be forgiven of all of his sins. And so what great consolation that brought to me that day. But Father Tony, he's such a good steward for the Lord, and he organized to have a healing mass at 5:00 and very short notice, because it was 3:00, which also God revealed to me. I knew 3:00 is the Divine Mercy hour. Bart was put on the ECMO, and then it was 3:00 when the doctor came out and said that it was a success. And I looked at the time and I thought, oh Lord, 3:00, that did not slip past me, that this is a Divine Mercy hour where God asks us to put all of our faith and our trust into him. So he's asking me to believe him. He's asking me to be patient. And now he's telling me you need to trust me. So it started there.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a medical treatment standpoint, I'm so unfamiliar with this ECMO machine and procedure. Is this something that Bart was then on for a long period of time, or is it a short term?
75 days. They had a cannula in my neck, and it would bypass my my blood flow from my neck through an oxygenation machine, and then back into my body.
It basically oxygenates your blood, because your lungs are really struggling to do so.
And it has a filter in it, and it filters out all the bad stuff, and then it oxygenates it, and it puts it back in your body. But it has to have blood thinner, because the blood clots could get caught up in the equipment. So
sure,
you got to thin that out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And in having the ECMO to save his lungs, the doctor told me anything could happen to his body, because your body this is not normal for how your body operates. Mm-hmm. So, even though we're trying to save his lungs, he could have a seizure. He could have, a blood clots could kill him. If it got pulled out, he could bleed to death. Any of his organs could fail, because this is, again, you're forcing your body to do something that it's not normally used to doing.
And COVID was out of my system at this time. It was the ECMO machine now that was making my organs start to fail or get weaker, or they were getting too stressed out from all the extra effort they had to do. Yeah, from that ECMO machine, because I guess it was it would clean the blood, but it would shear my blood vessels. It was going so well. That's another story here. Mm-hmm. It was going in me so fast, it was shearing my blood vessels and making my kidneys work harder. But I guess that's natural to happen. It happens naturally, but it was going in faster than normal. So they tried to slow down my heart, and they could not get my heart to slow down. So they tried to put they put 2 ECMO machines on me. So I had one in my neck, one in my groin, and they ran them together so that they could run it, because they got to time them with your heart. So they pump the good blood at the same rate as your heart.
Yeah, his heart was too strong, so they couldn't get his heart to weaken. So they said, well, what can we do? I mean, they had to try to find a solution, and so yes, they put in two ECMO circuits.
So when you say COVID was out of your system by then, obviously they were testing you frequently. How long did that take before?
2 weeks.
I don't really know because they had him in isolation until the beginning of November. But I think the COVID was already out of his system at that point, but they didn't really officially tell me. At that point, it didn't matter. It was the damage that hit. The doctor said it's like a tornado that comes through. The damage is done. So the COVID was the tornado, and now we have to repair what has been done.
Yeah.
And so every time they would work on repairing something, like the next day, something bad would happen again. And then another good thing would happen, and then bad. I got to the point, and I would update our prayer warriors every night because I wanted them to be involved. And the more they knew, I just felt the more that they would keep praying for him. And so they were so supportive. I needed that. I really needed the prayers for myself and our family as well. Because I tried to be positive every day, even though I knew this was a huge mountain that we were facing. I just felt like I did not want Bart to realize how bad he was, and I thought he could hear me. I needed the doctors to know who he was and that they were fighting for more than just a body laying there. And so I tried to be as positive as I could every day going into the hospital, which took a toll on me a little bit, but having all those prayer warriors definitely built that up. And that is, I think, one thing I really learned through all of this is prayer, like what prayer really means, and that it works. Prayer does work. My whole life, I try to pray and things, but sometimes I'll be honest, it just feels like you're just talking to the wind, is anybody hearing me? Because you're not having this back and forth conversation necessarily. But prayer does work. I mean, God does hear the prayers as people are saying them. And it also builds up the people who are in need of that prayer. So that was one really great thing that I learned from all of that, including at that healing mass when Father Tony had that, people told me afterwards he challenged everybody there, which was really great. His homily was fantastic at that healing mass in October. He told everybody, he said, when Jesus died, he was in the tomb for 72 hours. Now, the doctors told me that Bart's body, it would take 72 hours for his body to accept the ECMO. And during that time, he said it would look like he's dying because his body's going to go through a lot of really difficult things that it doesn't normally happen. So Father Tony said it looked like when Jesus had died, for 72 hours he laid in the tomb and it looked like he had died. He said, but he didn't. He resurrected. And he said, and we can ask God to do this for Bart, and God can do this, but we have to pray. And so people took that challenge on and told me, their prayer life really definitely increased during this time. I always believe God makes good out of bad, always, because God is good. So he can't do anything but make good out of bad. And that's what I just kept telling myself this entire time is, he's going to make good out of this no matter what happens. Of course, I know what I want to happen, but God, no matter what his will is and his plans are, he will make good out of this. And I thought one of the good things he did right from the start was increase people's prayer lives that were helping to pray for Bart.
Give us a idea of the extent of the prayer network that you had going. I think I cut you off when you first started talking about that, so I want to make sure we hit that.
Oh my goodness! So, it first started with my. I actually had asked, of course, our family to pray, but then our CCD teachers are like the best people ever, and I just love them so much. They're family to me, and so I asked them to pray. Well, then they asked the kids to pray. Then the kids asked their families to pray, and then the people that we knew asked people that they knew to pray.
She sent stuff to my office. My boss poured it on to my clients. Clients all over the country were praying for me. We found family on the West Coast that we didn't even know about that lived out there, were praying for us with their church and everything.
Yeah, it spread like wildfire. And I would send these updates to people, and then they would send those updates. And so I don't even know the extent of people who were praying for him, actually.
Yeah, Carmelite nuns praying for
The
me.
Carmelite nuns. Bishop Thomas said he was praying for Bart also. Yeah, so he had, I mean, that was definitely a blessing, that God had so many people lifting Bart up in prayer.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. We're listening to Bart and Mindy Recker talk about their faith journey through a very challenging half year dealing with COVID, of course, during the pandemic timeframe. This is your Catholic Radio Spring Spirit Drive. I think I need to sip on my coffee a little bit more. I'm not bored by your conversation, but my words are getting jumbled. Give us a call, listeners, please, 888-287-0655. You can also donate online at holyfamilyradio.fm or through the Holy Family Radio app or by texting the word GIVE to 419-969-3255. And you'll get a link back after texting that'll take you to the online pledging format. And Deacon Jeff gets notified of those pledges being entered in there.
I sure do.
We announce things that need to be announced, and the calls are great too because we hear that phone ring even with the studio door closed, and our wonderful volunteers bring us news. Speaking of news, we still have matching funds on the table.
Yes, we do.
A decent amount still
we have,
on the table.
Yeah, we need to fill this $5,000 worth of matching funds. We're probably not quite halfway there, so we need your help and your support right now. Otherwise, we don't get the rest of those matching funds. That's what the purpose of those are. It's like I'll give this amount up to this amount, but it has to be matched. Okay, so that's how that works, and that way your dollars, because you're adding to this list, it becomes doubled. So your 20 becomes 40, your 25 becomes 50, 50 becomes 100, and so on and so forth. You know how the math works. So 888-287-0655. That's 888-287-0655. I can look out the window and I can see that no one is talking on the phone right now. You can change that by dialing right now at 888-287-0655. Or if you don't want to miss any more of this story, but you want to listen, but you still want to give, do that texting thing. Text the number at 419-969-3255 to get a link and make that while you listen to our story here. The story, a testimony of faith and perseverance and trial and tribulation. A story of great faith, actually. And so it's a great example. We're pleased that we're able to have Bart and Mindy Recker here to kind of explain this story from, someone who was in trouble but didn't really know what all was going on to help him. And he had the warrior, I would guess to say, that was there to help make everything sort of
Marshal the resources?
Marshal the resources, right. To be that rock, that pillar, I guess. So we're somewhere along in this story. Why don't you kind of pick it up where we need to go to kind of
Yeah, there's so much to the story, so we're doing our best to get through it here. Yeah, so about November then, he had that second cannula placed in, and it was going to be just as scary as the first time and as dangerous. So I went to adoration, and I was there for 3 hours just praying to God during the time that I thought the procedure was happening. It actually ended up getting postponed to the next day, but in that time, I actually heard God speak to me, and he told me, let him go. Which was really terrifying because, and I was very confused because I thought, wait a minute here. You told me to believe, you told me to trust you, you told me to be patient, and now you're telling me to let him go, because instantly I thought he meant he's going to die. You're going to have to let him go. So that was really hard to hear. And, I struggled with that for quite some time. What could that have possibly meant? And right before that, one of my friends, actually, I had told her how I was, concerned, of course, about everything. And she kind of gave me a little saintly perspective. And she said, no, Mindy, he doesn't belong to you. He's God's child. He can do with him as he pleases, which I don't know if that would bring comfort to people, but it did to me for some reason, realizing like this is God's child. He loves him more than I could possibly love him. He's only going to make the best happen for him, whatever that is. But still, I didn't want to let him go. So, you know, I just kind of went on, and I just kept trying to trust and believe and take each day for what it was. And I wanted to be there every day, not knowing what would happen. It looked like each day that I'd walk into the hospital that he was dying. I mean, there were days, especially when he was paralyzed, that he did look like death already, because nothing moved. I mean, he didn't twitch. He his chest didn't go up like he was sleeping. So that was really, really difficult to see. And about this time, he actually started getting better in November, and they started lifting him up off his sedations. And then he had a turnaround again, and he had what's called an ileus, where his stomach it was tired. His body was just tired of all of the, medications. He had to be filtered through them and things. And so his stomach stopped working, which doesn't seem like it should have been too big of a deal, but it really was. It put him way back. They had to stop all tube feed, which meant all of his anxiety medication and everything that was being fed through that had to stop, which meant he started breathing faster again, which meant they had to put him under sedation again. And they actually ended up putting him under more sedation than previously. He was paralyzed again. And the longer you have somebody on sedation and paralyzed, you don't know how they're going to wake up out of that. Are they going to be mentally stable? Are they going to be able to do anything at all? And so that was a big scare. Also, they were trying to feed him, of course, but they couldn't give him tube feed, and of course he can't eat. And
I wasted away. I went in at 205 pounds. At that point, I was down to probably in that point I was 148 pounds. So I lost a lot of weight.
So they're basically glucose feeding at this point, intravenous.
Yeah, he had IV feed, and then his liver didn't like that. So then, his belly ribbon, like everything that they tried to do is they just faced, obstacles. But we had the best doctor. He never gave up on him. Thank God for him. And actually they ended up needing to do a biopsy, because what was happening is the volume in his lungs on the ventilator needed to be at 424 for his height, and they would recruit his lung volume, and then it would just go away again, and that they could not figure out why they couldn't maintain proper lung volume. So at this point, his lung volume was about 58, so they were pretty closed. So they knew that they'd already been doing this for 2 months. The ECMO, they thought the ECMO he'd only be on it for a month, and now we're already 2 months into it, and he still hasn't made any progress. And so they said, we have to do a biopsy to see what is going on. How are we going to help him overcome this? So that was scheduled. That was actually ended up being a really terrible day, because the ventilator would beep when he was in distress or having issues breathing. And they did the biopsy bedside, but we were in the waiting room, and I could just hear that beeping the whole time. He said it would take a half hour, and it was like an hour, and it's still beeping. So that was a sound that just really pierced my ears. And God, remember, like I said, he had said, let him go. So now I'm hearing he's not getting better. He can't eat, all of his liver's really taking a hit. There was fluid accumulating around his heart. Like, it just looked really bad. It just looked so bad. And I just kept saying, God, what are you doing through all of this? I'm trying to trust and believe, but if you're going to heal him, like you told me, why is he going through all of this? What is going on here? But our community was so wonderful. People were supporting us, not just through prayer, but they knew we needed help. Bart's the main bread earner in our family. And so I had this was another moment God just showered his love down. I had gotten a call from the rectory one day, and they said somebody had dropped off an anonymous donation. I picked it up. I ran home, I grabbed my mail, and then as I drove to the hospital, stopping at red lights, I opened the mail, very safe. And I was just blown away, because the first piece of mail I opened this particular day was the very first hospital bill that I had received. And then the very second piece of mail that I opened was that anonymous donation, and it covered almost exactly the amount. I just cried. I said, God, why do you love me so much? Like, you take such good care of us, always. And, again, no coincidences. For me to open that piece of mail and to open our bill and the donation at the same time, and he took care of it. He just let me know over and over, I'm taking care of you. Just keep coming, just keep trusting, just keep believing. Don't give up on me, is what God was telling me. Don't give up on me. So we did the biopsy. Again, it didn't go well. They said it would take, because they wanted to get 6 to 12 samples of his lung, but his lung actually hemorrhaged. and they could only get 5. So we ended up, they said in a week we'll know the results to know how to go from here, or if we can go any further. It might tell us that there's nowhere to go, and that's why he's not getting better.
Medical point of clarification. So when you say biopsy, does that mean that they were concerned? People think cancer. They hear biopsy, they think that means cancer. Was that what they were concerned about, or were they just wanting to take a closer look at the actual lung tissue?
Do you want to answer, or do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. So they just wanted to look at the tissue. They wanted to examine the tissue and discover what was the problem in the tissue itself. Was it a virus? Was it something that he would need steroids for? Did he have fibrosis starting, or was it just damage in the lungs that, scarring that it's just not going to heal, or that it's dead tissue? So there were 5 choices that it could have been. The first 3 were better choices. The last 2 weren't. So 3 days later, the results came back, which I needed to know, but I did not want to know what those results were. And I was just a nervous wreck the whole time. And, but I managed to stay there. My legs were moving so fast. I wanted to run out of there. I just didn't want to know, but it ended up being the second to worst possibility, which really actually didn't tell us anything. The doctor said, it's just time, we have to wait. And I'm like, God, come on. We're going through all this. But the big problem with that biopsy was that when they did it and his lung hemorrhaged, his lungs collapsed. So now his lungs are only at a tidal volume of 9. So one of the doctors actually said he didn't even know that the vent could register at 9 because they've never seen that. And he was saying, turn off the vent because you're putting pressure into this vent, into his lungs that could damage it more. But, our doctor, Dr. Cole, God ordained him for us, and he never gave up on Bart, and he was a man of God. And that's how I know, another reason I know God ordained him, because he matched us up perfectly. He told me, he said, I'm not tired. He said, most doctors would be tired by now, but I'm not. And he said, I will do everything I possibly can in my power to help every patient that I possibly can. Ultimately, it's God who has the final say. He said, but when I die, I know I want to have a good conscience that I did everything I possibly could. I don't want to give up on somebody because, it doesn't look good for the hospital, or, numbers don't look good, or things like that, or it's costing a lot of money. He said, I want to do everything I possibly can, because to whom much is given, even more is expected. And he cried with us. I mean, his heart was there. But he told us that Bart may never get off the ventilator if he survives this, because they just didn't know. And of course I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I want to do God's will, but that will be so hard. But then I tried to convince myself technology changes all the time, And then I said, you know what, God, if that is your holy will, then just give me the strength and give us as a family, and Bart, he would need it, obviously, to get through and to be able to live out what your holy will is.
Now, what time period are we at now?
We're in November.
No, still in November. Okay.
Yeah, and the doctor said he would give it 1 more month. And so now we have a clock, and that's what I was thinking. We have a clock. We've already given it 2. He was only supposed to be on this a month. We're already doubled the time, and now we have another month. And that was starting to get very, very scary. But again, the day that we get this news that he has, everything is going poorly for him, and really every organ starting to fail. I mean,
There was also another complication too, where my ECMO machine had a crack in it.
Yeah, that too.
So they had to do an emergency procedure at my bedside to replace that ECMO machine because it wasn't working. So I went. They did it by the bedside for the first time at St. Rita's, and I don't want anybody. And they did it, and they had to do it within 5 or 6 minutes.
5 minutes.
But they did it in 5 minutes. I was 5 minutes without oxygen. So I didn't have any oxygen for 5 minutes as they were changing that out.
Wow.
So that was another gift from God.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
for
I
sure.
could have been a vegetable after that. So
he seems to remember everything, like even the things that sometimes I
Yeah.
thought maybe he'll forget that. He has a really sharp memory.
Well, one of the things I remember everything before. Once when I eventually woke up after 3 months, I thought it was like September. I didn't know.
Sure,
I had
you
no
would.
loss of time.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that I didn't have any damage there in my brain.
He was trying to use his phone, which he couldn't.
I was
He had
trying
no
to contact
strength.
my clients because I
He
wanted
was
to tell
trying
them
to get
what's
a hold
going
of
on. I was like, but my phone was shut down. during this
It looks
time.
like you're an Ohio State fan. You probably wanted to know, how the Buckeyes did in their
They
last
say
game,
I
right?
was lucky to sleep through that game, the game that year. It wasn't good.
We won't talk about that.
Yeah.
Give us a call, listeners. We are halfway through our Spring Spirit Drive here on Holy Family Radio, and we need you to call and pledge your support. 888-287-0655. That's 888-287-0655. We're blessed to have in studio with us Bart and Mindy Recker, who are sharing with us their faith journey and their story of perseverance and growth through a near-death almost experience with COVID during the pandemic. So I think your journey started in September of 2021, and you've taken us up so far through November and all the ups and downs in Bart's medical condition, and he's basically sedated out at this point. And you're marshaling all those resources for prayer. So why don't you pick it up from there?
Okay, so the doctors decided this was another little tiny miracle, but I mean, it could be a big miracle, I guess, if you think of it this way. The doctors were trying to recruit more lung volume for Bart, and so trying to keep the vent from doing any more harming him, they decided to prone him, which means to turn him onto his stomach for part time and then turn him back to his back. Now, Bart had been in the hospital at this point on his back continuously for at least 2 months, a little bit more at this point. And so he could have had a bed sore, and bed sores can develop within a day or two, and they can be deadly. Our daughter, she was working in a nursing home at the time, and that was her question every day. Does he have a bed sore? Does he have a bed sore? So when they proned Bart, they were able to then check out his back really well, of course. And they used to have a running joke that when they'd flip him over, that Bart has a really nice looking butt, because they could actually see his back now there were no bed sores. So the entire time that he was laying on his bed, he had no bed sores. And I mean, I just think that is in itself is just it's a tiny miracle, but I mean, because they can be deadly, it could be a big one too, I guess.
Sure, that could have been
point.
yet one more complication of the body systems, that were already under attack, kind of from all fronts. So,
Right.
yeah, that is truly amazing that,
Yeah.
in a lot of that time, not only sedated, but paralyzed. So,
He's not moving.
there's no even natural movement
Right,
happening
right.
there, in the
Yeah,
sleep.
the nurses were so great. I mean, St. Rita's, I can't speak highly enough for their staff there. They were so compassionate and caring, but they were very tentative to Bart too. So as far as rotating and turning him every 2 hours, like they were so great at that. So I do attribute a lot of that to them as well, but of course God gets ultimate credit here. So Bart had his biopsy done, and we're just, we get the results back that it's not so great. And again, every organ is just taking a hit. He's going to probably need dialysis. Dr. Cole's concerned because dialysis is not a good option when you're on ECMO. It's just ECMO is already a life-saving measure. Dialysis is another. They just wouldn't coincide very well. So he was so concerned. And so each day I'm going, at one point, he had 11 IV ports. It looked like a Christmas tree. So I'm just sitting there, cords everywhere just coming out of him. And I'm trying to be positive. So I'm coming in just trying to be positive. And the nurse really, I had her convinced, I think, of my positivity, that she thought I didn't understand the gravity, I think, of what was going on. So for 2 days, she kept saying, Mindy, and this was out of love that she was trying to prepare me, I think, but she kept saying, Mindy, he's probably not going to make it. I mean, it was very bleak.
Yeah.
And she said, and if he does make it, he'll probably be on a ventilator the rest of his life. He'll probably be in a nursing home. Do you think that's what he would want? And I was just trying to be gracious, and I listened to for about 2 days, and then finally I thought, I can't take this anymore. And so I said, when I married Bart, I took my marriage vow seriously, and I married him, as the vows say. I married him for better or for worse, and richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. And if it is God's will that he is on a ventilator and he is in a nursing home, then I will be with him in that nursing home, tending with him with that ventilater. And so after that, I think she saw, like, okay, she gets it. She understands that how this is going. But yeah, all at that same time, a friend of mine, again, God was showing himself to me, and she sent me a prayer. It was a Christmas novena prayer. And this prayer is back, it dates back to like the 1800s, I think is what it says on there, 1854 maybe. And it's a prayer of St. Andrew. And what it is it's said for 30 days, and you say this prayer 15 times per day. And if you say it piously and fervently, that with the belief that God will hear you, many have been able to get their miracle request granted. And so, of course, and I thought about this prayer so much. I prayed it and got a lot of people to pray it. And I just kept thinking, for God, there is no time. There's no time in heaven. And so it is not impossible for him to be thinking at the moment that he was born. That's a very real moment for him right now, about Bart, because that's why he came into this world, for you and for me and every person. And I do believe that he was thinking of every single one of us at that moment that he became a man. And so we're asking him at that very moment that you came here for Bart, remember, right now he needs you. Heal him, please, Lord. And so every day we prayed that prayer. And as we inched closer and closer to Christmas, we just kept praying that prayer. And as we inch closer, Bart continues to get worse and worse and worse. And now, but that's okay. I just kept praying that prayer, and I just kept trying to believe. December 23rd, actually 2 days before Christmas, a family friend of ours said to me, looking at his status, Mindy, it does not look good. And again, I'm trying to be positive. And I said, she said to me, he's probably not going to make it. I mean, it looks bad. And I think she wanted me to stop that prayer or stop thinking, she wanted me to face reality.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I just kind of blurted out, I said, where is your faith? I said, God can do anything at this very second. He can get him up out of this bed if he wants to. I said, don't you stop praying. We have 2 days until our Christmas miracle prayer. And I was believing that God was going to do this. And I just felt like the devil was just trying to get me astray, and I would just say, devil, I serve one God and it is not you. Or I'd say what Father Tony used to teach us sometimes. And that was, Jesus, pour your precious blood all over the devil right now. And I would say those things and I said, get out of here. I don't need you. Like, this is hard enough without you coming and putting all this doubt into me. So Christmas Eve comes along and Christmas Eve is here, and his nurse is working with Bart. And at this point, everything was status quo. They keep trying to reduce his sedations. It's not working. They're trying, all kinds of things. He was on blood pressure medication at that time. He wasn't urinating. His ileus is still there. He's not being fed properly, and he's just, they'd raise his arm and it was just skin hanging there. I mean, it was bad. But I told his nurse that evening, Christmas Eve, I said, Brian, I just want you to know we've been praying this Christmas miracle prayer, and I want you to get ready because you're going to see a miracle tonight. And so he said, okay, and then I went to bed because I'm like, God, you got this, I'll trust you. And I called the first thing in the morning, and I said, he answered the phone and he said, Mindy, I couldn't wait till you called. He said, I think you got your miracle. And he started telling me Bart was off of almost every one of his sedations that he was on. And mind you, they couldn't take him off. Every time they tried, he would start breathing fast again. He had a bowel movement, which doesn't sound exciting, but we were excited, because that meant he had his ileus is gone. His system is working. Mm-hmm. He was taking off his blood medication. He was responding. He'd been awake for 3 hours and he was responding to them. And so he said, all this happened overnight. Of course, hallelujah. Thank you, Lord. We got that Christmas miracle prayer. And it was from that moment on that everything just started turning right around. And so, again, prayer works, and God hears us. And he wanted to use this for Bart, for his glory, and I think he knew Bart was a strong man. Bart is a very determined person, very strong, stubborn sometimes too. And I would tell him, because he always likes to, win at everything he does. And so I would tell him sometimes, Bart, you are a fighter. This is one game you cannot lose. You fight and you come back to us, And I would tell the doctors that all the time, how strong he was. So
you got to speak to Bart for the first time then on Christmas Day. You said he was conscious, or?
Well, by the time. Go
so
ahead.
I had a tube in my throat. I still had the ventilator.
Sure.
I couldn't talk. So I couldn't even move. I was so weak from laying there 3 months. So I was basically, I couldn't do sign language. I was trying to mouth my words.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was making some good progress in mouthing, but they couldn't read my lips because I was so weak I couldn't even do that right.
Yeah.
And so then we even tried some eye apps later on to see if I can point to the words with the eye app and to get the language out. I didn't have enough strength to do that either. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of,
Wow.
Yeah.
That really shows the weakness and
Yeah.
in a very palpable way,
Yeah.
where your body was at. Yeah.
it was about a month, or it was about mid-January by the time I was able to say something. They put a speaker valve on my ventilator. So I was able to use that speaker valve to get words out. So that was the first time I could talk.
Which was so great because I hadn't heard his voice in four months. And so to hear his voice, it was weak, of course, at that time, but it was great. And it was his voice. It wasn't,
My voice didn't change.
hadn't been damaged from the trach, being in there or anything. It was his voice. But yeah. And then I wanted to kind of back up for one quick little second here because God showed himself again on Christmas. After Christmas, I wanted to thank I did everything I could all throughout this time to thank the hospital staff because I just so appreciate everything they did. And they became family, being there with them every single day, all day long. So I decided I made an ornament and I put the word believe on it. And I made one for each person each nurse and doctor who was in direct care with Bart at the time. And I also wrote up a little card that explained why Believe was so important to me. And so his one respiratory nurse, I had not shared with him the whole story up until that point about Believe. And he said when he opened that card and that gift, he couldn't believe it. He was like, oh my gosh. And he couldn't wait to talk to me. And because he said that he had been watching while Bart was sick, he had watched a movie where there was a coach who needed to get his team inspired to play better. And so he put the word believe above their door and then they would tap it, I guess, as they left. And he said, I wanted to put the word believe above the door. Now, had he put that word believe above the door, not knowing that God told me to believe, but God was inspiring him to do that because he knew I needed that. Probably at the time that I was like at my lowest, just trying to learn how to surrender and trust whatever it is that God was trying to do with this. If he would have put that there, it would have given me so much. And I said, Jason, that's the Holy Spirit talking to you. When you get that little tiny inspiration to do something, you should do it. Because to you, it might not be a big deal, but to the person who God's asking you to do that to, it could mean the world to,
Yeah. Yeah. You're the pencil in God's hand at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So Bart woke up and then his journey started to rebuild his strength again.
I had to rebuild my strength with all the nurses, all the rehab people. So that was from January through end of February there. So I was trying to build my strength. I went to Kindred for a little while there, 6 weeks, I think it was. That's at St. Rita's also. It's just another wing that they have for rebuilding your strength. The goal there was to get off the ventilator, and by the end time I was out of there, I was off the ventilator, so I got the tube out of my throat.
Which was a miracle because,
yeah,
again, the doctors did not think he would recover, let alone be off a ventilator.
I thought I'd be on the rest of my life, and I finally got off that. It was mid-February probably. And then I moved back to the St. Rita's rehab, and that was another wing till March 15th when they let me out.
Well, you earned your way out.
Oh, I had to work hard to get out. Yep. They thought I'd be there a lot longer than that, but I was strong-willed to do what I had to do to get out of there. So.
Mm-hmm. So tell us what that day was like, that March 15th, the day you were released and got to come home.
So Mindy had been doing a lot of things behind my back there, trying to make it special. So they have a bell that you ring when you leave the hospital. That you ring the bell when you leave rehab. And Mindy had arranged for all the nurses and doctors and Father Charles and all of his staff at the hospital to be on the floor at that hour that I was getting released. So there was like over 100 nurses and on that floor waiting for me to ring the bell. But prior to that, she was making arrangements so that they would keep me there just a little bit longer because she was arranging a parade at Glandorf Main Street with all the people. So when they got off of work, we'd be driving down Main Street and they'd all cheer and celebrate. Mm-hmm. And so she was working with the auction people to get me I had to be on auction for 2.5 months after I left the hospital. So she was working with them. She actually received the equipment the day before I was going to leave. It was in the car, but she told me it wasn't going to arrive till 3 o'clock on the day I was going to get out because I needed to stay there till about 3:30, 4 o'clock, so we'd be in Glandorf by 5 or so.
Yeah.
So she was arranging all these things, And I actually told her after I found out all this was going on, I told her, you need to go to confession. And I don't know if I can trust her again. 'Cause
I was convincing, wasn't
she was
I?
very convincing. She was making fake phone calls as I'm laying in the hospital. I was like, what's going on?
I did take acting class one time, so.
But it was great to go home. It was great to see all those people cheering me on. I really appreciate all the support everybody was giving us on that journey home, and was glad to be home. It was something to get used to be out of the hospital after 6 months. So I had to relearn how to take a shower and all that again. It was had to sit in the shower till I could stand up again because I was pretty weak still.
Yeah. Yeah. You're listening to Bart and Mindy Recker sharing their journey of faith through an extremely difficult time with COVID that Bart experienced in the fall of, beginning in the fall of 2021 and continuing on until the spring. 6 months of hospitalization and, lots of people saying he may not make it, the situation getting that bad. Give us a call, won't you, at 888-287-0655. That's 888-287-0655 and pledge your best gift, your best donation to help keep Catholic Radio, what'd you say earlier, Deacon Jeff, going and growing.
That's right. Just keep us going, number one. And number two, if we do get enough support, then we can keep on growing. Now, we've already got plans to grow, which is to put stations up in Fostoria and Van Wert, which help us to cover the full southern part of the Toledo Diocese. So that'll get us up to 5 stations, but actually only be 4 because we're in the process of selling our Findlay station because we really don't need that and that expense right now. So with that, we're going to expand and grow, but that's only if we can get the donations and the support that we need to be able to let God work in this community and in the areas that we reach. So please consider supporting Holy Family Radio. 888-287-0655. That is 888-287-0655. The phone lines are open for you to call right now at 888-287-0655. Remember, you can also do an online donation at holyfamilyradio.fm.
And we have matching funds on the table.
We still have matching funds on the table. I need to take a look at my spreadsheet over here to see if I've got any changes or updates to report. And there's nothing on the online side. So,
but if you want to take advantage of some matching dollars offered
absolutely.
by a generous donator, please call now, 888-287-0655, and see your 100 turned into 200.
It looks like we are 2/3 of the way there.
Okay, so we
have a couple $1,000 more available for matching. Mm-hmm. So you need to get in on that right now if you want to take advantage of that at 888-287-0655.
Yeah. As we mentioned, we're talking with Bart and Mindy Recker about their faith journey through a very difficult experience with COVID. So we've been hearing a lot from Mindy about her faith and ways God spoke to her through this and how her faith has grown through this. But of course, poor Bart was, basically unconscious during, months and months. So I'd like to toss it to you, Bart, and ask you, how has this experience impacted your faith journey?
Yeah, one of the things I learned before I got COVID, I spent a lot of time working. I think I had my priorities upside down. I'd be work, family, and then God. After recovering from COVID, I've changed that. I'm trying to go to church more than not on the weekdays. I'm trying to pray more to God. I'm trying to put God first, then family, then work. It's just something my life was upside down at the time. I needed to fix that. So I'm hopefully doing better. I'm trying to be more involved in the community with the church. There's things that I'm trying to do to improve.
Some people that have survived, natural disasters, huge accidents, mass shootings, all survivors, where many other people passed, but they did not. struggle with a whole host of issues of, having been that blessed one, that lucky one, that one that, didn't meet what at least humanity views as the worst fate. Have you had to struggle with any of those issues?
We did have some counseling. St. Rita's did offer that to discuss and talk over that, just the mental issues like that. I think I'm doing okay. What do you think, Mindy?
Some days. No, just kidding. Yes, you are.
Yeah. So.
Well, we did. I mean, we had, I don't know if you would call it survivor's guilt. Is that what you're kind of referring
Basically,
to?
yeah.
We did have that.
Yes.
Yes. Because we did know people who lost a loved one due to COVID or cancer or, during this time. And it was very hard. I mean,
Yeah, we'd say what we did to survive and to get through this, but then you're telling them what you did, and then you got to realize that their significant other maybe didn't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
it's never
your story is such a faith story. So when you start to tell it, it must be a little challenging to tell that story to somebody who's lost someone because of the fear. It sounds like, well, you didn't have enough faith. Like,
exactly.
We had enough faith,
and
but
that's
you didn't.
yes, and has been a huge, especially at the very beginning. But Father Tony, he counseled me on that because I was really upset about that. I mean, I just, I just felt terrible, and I knew God has His reasons for what He does, but He told me, never try to second guess why God does what He does, and He said, those people who had lost one, they may be in a better place than Bart. Right. And he said,
Yeah.
we see it from our eyes. We can't see it with God's eyes.
And the way I think of it too is, I would have been happy probably the other way, but my loved ones, what I would have left behind, wouldn't have been so happy. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a matter of faith. I think it's just God's will, and what He chose to do with it. And because God works in mysterious ways, so we can never try to figure out why He's doing this, or we can never look at ourselves and say it's because I did or didn't do something. It's ultimately like Dr. Cole said, it's ultimately His will. Even if Dr. Cole works as hard as he can and does everything medically right, somebody still may not make it. And God knows our day and He knows our time. And all we should be trying, hopefully, to focus on is that we live each and every moment as best we can, so that when we get to see Him someday, we can account for that time and say, Lord, I did everything I possibly could. I didn't always do it right, but I tried my hardest to do it out of love for you and to work according to your will. But that was definitely a struggle.
Sure. Well, it would be, I imagine it's natural. I've never experienced anything like that. But you hear of that all the time, and yeah, it's that's some great advice you got from Father Tony, that just don't second guess it and look for the good in it. I mean, look at how it's obvious, I suppose, to us that you have this ability to share this witness now.
yeah.
And you are very forthright and open about your experience, and so God is using you in that way, to share the efficacy of prayer and the importance of support, and that He's always there for us, and believe, all those messages that you're able to share.
Yeah.
When
I woke up, I thought Tony was at the hospital visiting me, and I asked him, what do I need to do to thank God? What do I need to do for God to thank Him for this, for healing me? He said, pray about it. But I think after praying about it a little bit, sharing with everybody and sharing the story is what I should be doing, is sharing. I don't want to keep it to myself. I think it's just something that I need to talk about to get it out there.
Don't
Yeah.
hide that light under a bushel,
Yeah.
huh?
Right.
Yep.
He gives you a gift to use and to give
Yeah.
it to others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
absolutely.
want to thank everybody for all the prayers. And
Yeah.
I imagine.
One thing, speaking of gifts, so at the beginning of this, I had mentioned 47, and Bart was 47 when he went into the hospital. And I told Bart, I talked to him about this a lot still, because it was so profound to me, such a message to me, that I try to figure it out. I even asked Father Tony, what was this 47 about, but what happened was when Bart, so he told me in July to 47, and I didn't know what that meant. And then Bart turns 47, and then at Christmas, his brother, so Bart gets a Christmas novena miracle, right? He gets his Christmas miracle, and at Christmas time, his brother came to the hospital and he gave him a gift, which was a Buckeye hat. since he loves Buckeyes. It was warm though. Well, first of all, Bart was in the hospital till March, so we didn't need the hat until he left. But it was actually a warm day. We wore T-shirts the day he left. Later on, kind of like our weather right now, it got cold again, and so we were going to doctor's appointments. He had his hat on, and he said, "Mindy, did you see my hat?" And it's Buckeyes, you know. Well, on the side of the hat, it said 47, and I've learned that is an actual name brand, I guess, but it meant a lot to me because here's number 47 again. What is God saying, right? Like, why is he saying this? And I've contemplated this ever since this has happened, and I don't know if I can adequately express what I think about it, but so I think God was there at the beginning. He gave me this message because he knew I'd hear his voice. He knew that I would understand. I'm trying to give you a message, and that I would seek to try to understand what that is. And then we prayed for the miracle, and he granted Bart a miracle, and then add Christmas, and then he got a Christmas gift that said 47, which I think God wanted me to see that hat at 47, that it was a Christmas gift, and that Christmas gift was Bart's healing.
But my brother didn't even know anything about.
Yeah, his brother had no idea what 40, like that was to him. He just bought it because God used him again, like I was saying with Jason with the word believe. But we didn't see that until he was out of the hospital at the end of the journey. So God was there at the beginning of the journey, wanting us to see that he was the one. Yes, you prayed this Christmas prayer, and I gave you that gift. Here's that 47, I'm telling you. And then at the end of the journey, when he's out of the hospital and he made it through this whole thing, God's saying, it was me. See, I was there the whole time. I told you I'd be there.
I got 2 more miracles real quick.
Please.
Sorry.
Well, after I got out, we had to do a lot of appointments with doctors for follow-ups. One of the things I had was a lot of damage in my trachea. So a normal trachea is peach color looking, and it's smooth. Mine was all white inside. All the cartilage was exposed all the way down from top of my lungs all the way up. So it was something they'd never seen. I had my pulmonologist had been doing this for 30 years, and he's never seen such a thing. He called it the log cabin effect. I think he wrote a paper on it. But after my first visit, this was what it was during the hospital, but after my first visit, after a month or so later, half my trachea had regained the pinkness back. It was starting to heal. He thought he was going to have to cut that all out, and I'd be on a trach the rest of my life, ventilator the rest of my life, because if you cut that out, that's your structural, your rings in there. Yeah. So after the first visit, half it healed. After the second visit, the whole thing healed.
Wow.
So they didn't have to do anything with that.
Yeah, and just like he calls him the miracle man every time he sees him, and he always brings students in and says, "Look at this miracle man," and makes them look.
It's an uncomfortable exam because they got to put a camera up your nose, down your throat. It's uncomfortable, and then you got students in there trying to learn, and then, so he's taking his time. And you're like, hurry. So that was one, and then the other miracle after we came out was I also had from all that from the ventilator blowing into my lungs, I had a fist-sized dark spot in my lungs. It was a void space where my alveoli just wasn't there anymore from the damage. After the first visit, that doctor, he said, you shouldn't fly because that could pop. So he said, let's see what happens here. I didn't know what they were going to do to fix it. But then we went to our second visit afterwards, and he did another chest X-ray, and it had filled in with alveoli. Wow. So that dark spot's not there anymore. So that was another wow moment. It's like God is His mercy there.
Yeah, when Bart was sick, I went to Mass as much as I could. I wasn't working at the time, so I would go to the Mass. I'd go to the hospital. And at each Mass that I would go to during the consecration, knowing that that's where Christ meets us is at the altar, I would just say, Lord, I place Bart on the altar for you as a offering of love. It's a sacrifice of love, but please pour your precious blood all throughout his body. Heal everything within his body that is not the way you intended it to be, and just heal him. And so
I'm still praying for one more. By September this year, the pulmonologist told me it might take 2 years for my lungs to get healed to the point where they might be close to normal again. Right now, if I go up a stairs, I get tired, I get winded. So I'm hoping or praying by the September this year that I'll be able to jog again. Right now, I'm a fast walker, so my lungs have healed enough to where I can walk. But I haven't been able to jog too much. I might be able to jog a minute every 5 minutes, but I get really winded and my oxygen levels drop. So we're praying that would heal, because I have a lot of scar tissue from all this stuff that went on in my lungs, and it's scars, so it doesn't really heal unless you get. I'm hoping divine intervention will help that along.
Yeah. Well, we'll add that to our prayers
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
sure.
Yes.
Yeah, you hit right on what I wanted to ask you. Was we hear all the time about long haul syndrome and long COVID and those sorts of things. So, are you dealing with any of those symptoms that they, if you don't mind sharing, that they refer to in the media, or is this more sort of your own unique because of what you specifically went through?
I think it's just all the scar tissue in my lungs that's my problem right now. That hopefully can heal some more. I do push. I have to work out more to expand my lungs again to get those to work better. So I am working out to do that, but I don't know if I have.
He doesn't have memory. They talk about like COVID brain.
I don't have COVID brain. I
doesn't
didn't
have
have that at all.
Yeah, he never had that. I mean, he woke up, the day he woke up, he actually was starting to make sense of things. And actually he was thinking, what's going on?
Yeah.
Because I'm here for COVID. Why are you guys doing dialysis? Like,
Right.
so he had enough, wits about him. I mean, he knew that that's not what he came in here for. And so he doesn't have anything like that. I mean, the only thing that he has is just his breathing, and that was due to all the inflammation and the scarring.
And I had no other comorbidities when this happened. I was a little overweight. I didn't have anything else with my lungs, no issues. So it's just
amazing, isn't it? They identify, many things, the comorbidities that, put certain people at risk. And some people had those things and, would breeze right through COVID. And then,
we know
someone
somebody
like
has COPD
yourself.
and they
Yeah.
got COVID and nothing. They were fine after a couple days.
Exactly.
So it's just amazing how that disease affects people.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've questioned, Bart has never said, why did you do this to me, God? He always just says, thank you, God, for getting me through it, because God doesn't make bad, and COVID is bad. God doesn't do that. He permits things, obviously, but he'll use it for good. And so we believe that when this happened to Bart, that he said, we're going to use this for good. We're going to use this where he knows Bart's a fighter. Well, he made Bart. He knows who he is. He's been with him all his life. He's a fighter. He's all those things. And I think that God said, we're going to use this for my glory.
So beautiful.
So beautiful. I'm glad that you could share that with us and be a part of it today, because I know it's probably not easy to come and join us on radio. A lot of people are really nervous about speaking on the air, but really it's just a conversation amongst friends, right? It's not that easy and hard, but it's a wonderful story of faith and triumph ultimately through a lot of trial, a lot of tribulation. I know that there's a lot that you probably could go into and detail on, because it's just a lot. But we're so grateful that you could be here to join us today, and I hope our listeners enjoyed and got something from that as well. So thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you're listening to the Spring Spirit Drive here on Holy Family Radio. You got a chance to listen to Bart and Mindy Recker talk about his journey with COVID and ultimate triumph, and able to come in here today and tell us their story. So we thank them again for joining us. So this is the Spring Spirit Drive here on Holy Family Radio. I'm Deacon Jeff along with Kim. Thank you so much for listening. Keep listening. Please donate. We still have matching funds available the rest of this afternoon. 888-287-0655. 888-287-0655.
You can always donate online as well at holyfamilyradio.fm or on the Holy Family Radio app, which is available for both Android users as well as Apple users. And if you want, you can receive a text that will take you directly to the link. It will send you the link. If you text GIVE to 419-969-3255, it will send you a link to take you directly to the online pledge. Or you can call 888-287-0655. This is Holy Family Radio. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with Julie Monin.
Yep.